This is Changeling the Podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the Podcast. Come for the glamour, stay for the vibes. I'm your host Josh, and with us is your other host Puka. Say hi, Puka.
Howdy.
What are we talking about today, Puka?
Sudden book drop interview question format thing. We recently saw the release of On the Umber Road on the Storyteller's Vault and Drive-Thru RPG, and we are fortunate enough to have author Thomas Milare with us today. Greetings, Tom.
Hello.
Are you joining us from New Hampshire today?
I am. That is home base for me. It's I've been here continuously since '02, but I moved here originally in '94.
The glory days.
But yeah, right now I'm here from New Hampshire.
So yeah, this was pretty exciting. Like, a lot of times, I feel like we have a pretty good finger on the pulse of changeling content in development, homebrew content, because people bring up ideas, people float things, people notify us of stuff, but this kind of came out of nowhere. So it's a pleasant surprise this week.
Yeah.
I'm glad I could be of service.
Why don't you just give us a bit of background on how you got into role-playing games and Changeling specifically before we dive into
Definitely.
role-playing games in general, and then we'll get into Changeling.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I was thinking about this actually before we popped in. I had the opportunity to listen to a couple of some of the previous podcasts, and I'm not a avid listener because I don't do a lot of these kind of podcasts, but I wanted to try to bone up on what some of the questions were going to be. For me, I started my very first role playing game was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. And I was very young. The Palladium stuff is pretty complicated, so I didn't quite get it. I had an older cousin who was into role playing, and I loved turtles, so there you go. But I didn't really catch my attention again until, oh gosh, I have to say middle school. I was 12 or 13. I had some friends who were into D&D and scouting. You want to fit in when you get into that, when you start doing that stuff with your friends. So I started playing tangentially. Really, I saw things like some of the old TSR video games, but in eighth grade, I got my hands on a copy of Vampire the Masquerade Revised. I'd seen a copy of second edition. That's what I was hoping for Christmas, but I ended up getting a copy of Revised, and I was hooked on the World of Darkness. And my gaming group's been together since. We consistently meet almost every Saturday since '02. And,
Oh wow!
Yeah, I know.
Your gaming group is old enough to drink.
Yeah. With Changeling specifically, I remember seeing the book. I was in ninth grade. Somebody was running a game. We had a games club at my high school, but I didn't play it. And then another year or so went by. I think I found the quick start online, downloaded it, printed it out, and I've been kind of obsessed ever since.
Nice.
Nice.
So have you worked on homebrew material before this?
I mean, I've written down some of my ideas and put them out there in the past. Many years ago, my friends and I we curated a small wiki about our World of Darkness, but I've never had the desire, or that's not true. I've never had the drive, I think is a better way of saying it, to try to find something and push it to completion. And thankfully with Storyteller's Vault putting out like the templates and whatnot, the barrier to entry has lowered significantly enough for someone like myself to want to dip my toes in the water.
And how did this project in particular? How did this come about?
So I think, like a lot of things in recent memory, it comes back to the pandemic. I was trying to get a couple ideas I had for games off the ground. I brought in some folks here and there from like a Changeling Facebook group or people I know in real life or whatnot to try to play some games, and they ended up falling through for one reason or the other. But in doing research for one of the games, which was going to be set in and around my home area because I know it the best, and I could travel to a place to maybe get some pictures or whatnot for the online folks. I found a news article from the early 20th century, and when I say early, I mean like we're talking like 1903, 1906, something like that, from our local newspaper. And it talked about an animal that some farmers had seen that had been scaring their livestock. And the news article, like most newspapers do, they tried to sensationalize it, and they called it the dairy beast or the dairy monster. And that hooked me like instantly. Now this thing ended up being like a big cat that was rare in these parts at that point. They're extinct here now, but the idea, just the thought that they were sensationalizing it, but that it could have been some sort of monster or creature or whatever, really dug into me. And I thought like, oh well, maybe some sort of werewolf thing or some sort of spirit or whatever. And it got me rolling down the ideas. And I started with just one story idea, but then in building the story idea, all these different characters kind of came out, and I was like, well, why don't I put it all together and see if anybody likes my ideas? Because it all started to form into the various plots and story potential and the different characters and the history that it became over time. I think I've been working on it in this particular iteration for about 3 years.
Missed opportunity to capitalize on the alliteration of Derry Devil with that creature. Like, it seems like a very natural.
No doubt, right?
Maybe it sounds too cute though. Like, oh, you're such a Derry Devil. So speaking of Derry, Derry is the centerpiece of this book, I would say. I've never been to Derry that I can recall, but I do feel just kind of from the front matter, from the back cover as well, it really seems like this is almost like a love letter to the town and kind of turned into a changeling story as well. So what was it about your hometown that you thought would make for good game world building? Like that one inciting incident from the early 20th century aside, what is it about Derry that brings the glamour out?
I always thought that everybody felt the same way about their hometown as I did. And I've talked to a couple other people. Apparently that's not the case. And I feel like I have two hometowns. I would like to say it like that. I have Derry, and I've lived here, as I said, for decades at this point. And my grandmother, and I spent a lot of time with her in my youth, lives in a small town called Sherwood, Oregon. Not so small anymore, but when I was a kid, it was incredibly small. And they both have this kind of insular quality to them, this small town attitude. And to me, that speaks so much to what a good story could kind of be. You got these people who all know each other, they're in each other's lives. They've got the family, almost found family foibles that you've got in any group of friends or people who know each other long enough, plus the love and care that they have for one another. Now, Derry is not an incredibly small town. It's actually one of the largest towns in New Hampshire. It's got about, I think, 30,000 people. But when I look at it, when I see it, I mean, I see people all the time that I know. I mean, every day I come across somebody that I've known for, many, many years. And that's just either at work or, at the grocery store or whatever. So I feel like the sense of community really is a big vibe for me that speaks well to any story you could want to place anywhere. And Changeling in particular, this is the town where Robert Frost talked about the West Running Brook. This is the town that he wrote most of his early poetry in. Alan Shepard is from this town, the first American astronaut. So for me, so much inspiration in those kinds of things. The things that I love personally. The space race is something that's near and dear to my heart, and most of the American canon and literature. You could think of. I mean, it also, a lot of it stems from New England to begin with. So New England is just a wonderful, beautiful place. And it took me a long time to get there because I don't want to bore you with my own personal story, but I've lived here for so long, and it was my friends. It was the friends we made along the way that made me want to be here. I came back here after having moved away because I had so many connections and I felt so tied to the place. But I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. The reason why the book is autumn themed is because autumn is really the only time in the whole year when I find this place bearable for any appreciable amount of time. The weather is perfect in autumn, but every other part of the year I have allergies or it's just too damn cold.
Mm.
I joke about that, but I think I've lost the question.
No.
I think I've
Well,
walked away from it.
no, I mean, that's
I
fine.
think it answered it.
Okay.
Maybe we should give a bit of for listeners who have not picked up this book, just a brief overview before we dive into it more details. Like, what is this book about? Maybe give like an elevator pitch.
I think if I was to try to explain this to somebody who hopefully has a cursory understanding of Changeling, is that this is the story of the Kithane who live within the Barony of Nutfield, and the everyday quality of their life, and how sometimes that everyday quality of their life turns into something much, much bigger.
I would say, yeah, this book has more detail, if you include it in your Changeling canon, than any other book in Changeling about a location. It's amazing, but like, really good stuff. But like so much stuff. Like,
That's kind of what I wanted, to be perfectly honest
yeah.
with you, because if you look at some of the other location books, first of all, none of them are small scale.
Mhm.
You know, you have a duchy in San Francisco, you have a kingdom in the southeastern United States. You know, it's great for that broad thinking, but most games are going to be set in a relatively small area. And that's kind of what I wanted to capture myself. And what better place to capture than someplace I know intimately?
Well, you're talking about these other books. To what extent? I guess the one that I actually thought it reflected most closely for me was Freeholds and Hidden Glens, because that one does get into kind of small scale because it's individual freeholds. And I wondered if that book, or like the chapter on Kingdom of Apples and War and Concordia, even, dare I say it, Noted Vampire the Masquerade book, Dark Colony, any of these sort of New England set pieces that we do get in the canon, did any of that kind of inform your take?
I will say that I live down the street from the house I lived in when I was 15 years old or so, 14 to 15, which is when War and Concordia came out. I think 2000, right?
Something like that, yeah.
I had that book then, and I still have that exact copy that I had then, sitting on my bookshelf right over next to me. And I read and reread and reread and reread that book so many times that I think it cannot help but have informed at least a little bit. The Battle of Cold Fort,
Yeah.
sticks out in my mind whenever I think about that book, because it's set in New Hampshire, at least that little piece. That being said, I didn't put in much regarding the actual Accordance War itself or the Second War either. I don't think I referenced the Second War at all, actually. The Accordance War at least has a brief mention. But,
Yeah.
in terms of the context of like what the actual books had in them, I didn't really touch on anything from them. But I think I've always been inspired by anything that talked about a place that I've been or I'm familiar with. Dark Colony, not so much. I will say that I don't like that book. Let's be completely honest with ourselves.
Nobody
I ran a
does.
vampire. I ran a vampire game set in Boston once, and there were no Giovanni there except for maybe one in Little Italy.
That's an acceptable omission from the inspirations list. Shall we flip some pages?
I'd love to.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah.
We'll say this is still like this program. Like, you have it up pay as you want, right? And
Correct.
this book is not done at this version that I'm reading.
Yeah, no. You're correct. It is pay as you want. I initially put it up there for free, but a person on the Changeling the Dreaming, Changeling the Lost Facebook group was like, he's also from New Hampshire, and he was when I talked about it there, he was eagerly awaiting this book, and he's like, at least put it up for pay as you want, so I can put something towards it. And I'm like, I'm not putting this up here for money, guys. But hey, if you want to throw something at me, then I can pay for some internet or pay for more books for myself. But yeah, no doubt, it is a work in progress. Most of its primary is fundamentally locked. But like even today, I thought of something that I wanted to kind of tweak, like the relationship between two important characters, for instance. So I'm sure that little things are going to change like that, but fundamentally the core concept.
Yeah, and just there's some formatting.
Oh,
I think you're still doing.
Some formatting. He says it definitely.
Just a bit.
Yeah,
My wife is way more intuitive into any of these Adobe products than I am, and she found the problem that I had that I'd been tackling for the last 3 months, and figured it in a matter of minutes. And I'm like, oh well, that's great. That doesn't make me feel like I can't use a computer at all.
So you start with this, if I can call it a statement of purpose, that's very lovely, I have to say. I mean, what you were just kind of talking about with Derry, I thought that was a nice opening thing. And then we get this mysterious anonymous framing letter, which also good. It moves briskly at the start, which is nice. We get like an opening story, we get the introduction. I commend you especially on putting the theme and mood front and center in here. I have this written down. The theme being the balance between nostalgia and inevitable change within a small enchanted town standing on the threshold of transformation, and the mood being bittersweet hope threaded through with quiet unease. And as someone who appreciates themes and moods, I was very into those two things. So, kudos.
I appreciate that. I think that it's important to try to establish what your vision is if you're trying to present something to the people at large. So I mean, what I think necessarily might not always come through in the entire text. So if I try to say to you right up front, then you can either take it and run with it or do with the entire thing what you will. But I think it's important to know what my mindset is going in.
Yeah. Other things here. So you have an Instagram link, which is a curious addition. I don't think I've ever seen one of these like little Insta QR codes in a homebrew book before. So I guess how did this come about? And if I were to scan this, what would happen?
So this takes you to an Instagram I set up specifically to showcase the town and the surrounding area. So I initially started taking pictures again for a chronicle that I was going to run and that unfortunately didn't get off the ground. But it was set here. It was it was kind of like a proto iteration of what I have come up with now. And if you were to go to this Instagram account, what you'd see is various pictures of the town. You'd see, I think the most recent one I did was a Christmas picture of one of the tree with a bunch of Christmas lights on it. Somebody probably had to get a cherry picker in there to put some of those lights on. But I have some of the beautiful parks and conservation areas. The cover picture is of the Derry Wyndham Rail Trail, and that's actually we go walking there. My wife and my son and I frequently, and that is my son in that picture.
Oh,
yeah. But at one of the junctions of that road, there is the Robert Frost poem, "The Road Not Taken," painted on the ground. You'll probably notice that the town, we lean into the fact that Robert Frost lived here and he taught at the school here for a number of years. He did not enjoy his time in this town, by the way. I don't know if that's something historically widely known, but anyway, that poem is on the rail trail, and I took a picture of each of the stanzas. So some of the wooded trails, examples of architecture, things like that.
My own New Hampshire specific experience is fairly limited. It's I think the state of New England I've spent the least amount of time in. I have been there, but not much. But a lot of these setting books, because as we've commented before, so often they're written like, I mean, a lot of the material probably was taken from travel guides. So it doesn't necessarily bring the visualization to life in a way that suits what you're going for. So having that link, I thought was an interesting move to kind of maybe work in a different direction. So yeah,
definitely. I really tried to steer away from the travelogue kind of thing too, because this is fiction.
right.
After all, I mean, I think I say it at one point or a couple of points, like there are people who are going to read this book who may be familiar with it, maybe familiar with the town, I should say. Probably the vast majority are going to be people who aren't. And I want the people who read it, who know the town, to see the things in it are familiar, but also to see things that, are perhaps a little bit more fictionalized or made up whole cloth. And I want the people who don't know anything about it to be able to look and have a reference for something that is solid and real, so that they can know that, just because some of this stuff is not true to life exactly, there is a very real foundation that I'm drawing on. That, I think, more than anything, is why I put the QR there.
And I think the whole writing's like this, it's really good. when you're doing setting books before, especially since a lot of those were published in the 90s, what you don't fall into in this trap in this book is, oh, why can't I just read that online or read on Wikipedia or whatever? Like, this feels like, okay, yeah, if I was to set a chronicle in Derry, I would definitely want to read up outside of this book, but that reading's very easy to do. Like, I can go to Wikipedia, read the thing on Derry, read a few other things, read some other travel things or whatever, look up Google Maps, that's all fine. All the stuff in here is stuff that I'm not going to find from that, which is...
I did go look at the Pinkerton Academy wiki page out of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you did? It's a good school. I went there. I only went there for 1 year, but all of my other friends went there and graduated from there.
So maybe we should just say briefly the structure of this book. After the introduction, kind of goes through setting briefly, some of the historical information from, I guess, both a mortal but mainly Fae perspective. Then the geography, similarly kind of split between the two, the changeling residents, the motleys and social webs between them, and then an intro adventure in the 6th chapter, which was nice, plus some crunchy tidbits at the end.
Yeah, it's another changeling chronicle you can drop in for new players.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of those.
And specifically new players. I mean, I appreciated the emphasis on getting people into the game through the medium of that story. So,
yeah, that story... we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Sorry, we'll get there.
One chapter at a time.
Yeah, no doubt.
So a thing that comes up in the introduction chapter and in the setting chapter and all the stuff, you're talking about the lost queen. So, like, where did that idea come from?
So I think most people, they enjoy music, right? Everybody's got their favorite bands. And I've worked for Walmart for a very long time. I've done a lot of different jobs there. I was a manager at various times. Front end, back room, you say it, I've done it. And I say this because my job right now, it doesn't take a lot of brain power. And so I can put it in an AirPod and listen to some music or a book on tape or whatever.
Or Changeling the podcast.
Or Changeling the podcast,
Sorry,
actually, which I did that. This is something I did today, actually, to prepare for this.
Huzzah.
Exactly. But no, one of my favorite bands is called Brothers of Metal. They're a Scandinavian power metal band, and a lot of these bands have like motifs. They've got a gimmick, they got a shtick, and theirs is they're Vikings. They tell Viking saga stories, and one of the songs is called Hell, just Hell. As in the goddess Hela. And I was listening to it one day, and the idea that there was this secret person kind of behind the scenes bending the web of fate to her desire kind of struck at me like a bolt of lightning, and kind of she developed from there. Not whole cloth, not the whole story, but I mean the idea that there was someone somewhere else doing something to try to manipulate this town. Because I felt like, one of the notes I got from my first reader, before I gave her the appendix chapters, was everything seems so idyllic and happy. And in the beginning, that really was how it was. There wasn't any kind of antagonist or conflict beyond what the little things that drew out of some of the stories that I was readying for the chronicle I was writing. So, I at the end of the day, I felt like I needed a main antagonist, and that's where she came from.
Yeah, because she doesn't read like an antagonist until you start kind of looking more carefully.
Exactly.
And especially the name, what is it? The Verdant Court. You're like, oh, that sounds so bucolic and nice. And then it's like, there's more going on here under the surface.
Exactly.
This feels very Woonie Changeling in a good way. Like, you somehow brought back the mood, even though it's very firmly in C20 and even reference like some of the other Storyteller Vault stuff. But like it still has a lot of everything's still kind of mysterious a little bit, even though you give so much detail. I really like that. I just wanted to say
I like the way you say that, and I certainly appreciate it. It was not intentional. I have a first edition Changeling book.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever actually opened it.
Okay.
I think I got it for collector's sake.
Okay.
So,
and not just the core book, but like some of the supplements too have that mood. So that was just interesting. Okay.
Again, Freeholds and Hidden Glens.
Yeah. Which I thought I was just thinking of that book because it has a chapter on my neighborhood that I grew up in for some reason.
See, it catches you the same way that like other New England set books caught me. All right.
But you see, you say that, and yet the Umber Road itself that gets referenced here reminded me a little bit of that, whatever that one Trot is in the Toronto section, that it's like
Yeah.
all of the detritus of the world eventually ends up in. So
Yeah.
that idea of this back way of the town that kind of
Mhm.
links everything together. It's an Ishu's dream because you're just going from one story point to the next. But yeah, I agree with the comment on the mood.
I think I have the book. I have every Changeling book in hard copy. They're the only ones I didn't get rid of,
Mhm.
and I'm sure I've read it or looked through that one at some point. But I would be lying if I said I remembered a single thing from that book.
Mhm.
It's worth a flip through for
Yeah.
sure.
I didn't think you were like riffing on it or anything. I just think.
Oh no! So I'm not suggesting that,
Yeah.
not at all. I'm just it's interesting. It's like you've referenced it a couple of times now.
Yeah.
I've been racking my brain for the last 20 minutes,
Yeah.
saying to myself, "What can I remember
Well-
from that book?"
Well, it's funny. Like the whole thing that keeps coming back as I'm reading this is it feels like I keep getting homesick for where I grew up, and like I think it's because you love this place so
Yeah.
much. It feels very describing home to someone who misses it, even though I've never been to this place. It's interesting.
I am really happy to hear you say that. So the inspirations and whatnot. My wife and I are currently doing a rewatch of Once Upon a Time. We finished Gilmore Girls about a
Mhm.
month or two ago. These are at the bottom of that list. But when I think about media trying to showcase a place as a character, the same way Star Trek does with the starships, that the
Mhm.
Enterprise is as much a character in whatever iteration you're looking at as Captain Kirk is. So, and I think it's important for the place that you're setting your story to be that much of a character as well. It has to be, or
Mhm.
else it's just hollow.
You say that, and yet coming at it from a totally different angle, when I got to the appendix, I put in my notes, oh, Twin Peaks. So that was more of the vibe that I was getting at. I do want to get back to the history chapter, chapter 2, because I wanted to ask, how did you choose these moments to focus in on? Because you do have sort of precise, aside from the sort of time immemorial of the verdant court and this queen, you do kind of have specific events that occur throughout the history of the town. Putting aside setting specific things like the Accordance War, I guess were these kind of centered on important parts of Derry's own history?
No, so are you referencing what specifically are you referencing? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm
Well, so you have like particular moments in the chapter, like I know 1977 comes up. You also have these letters at the end in different character voices
Oh.
that are drawn from different points in time.
No, those are so the letters specifically. I can tell you are just I chose a date.
Okay.
Or I chose a point in time because I wanted a story snippet from that perspective. And like so the time basically between 1719 when the first settlers arrived here and the resurgence, aside from the technological change, not a whole lot of actual societal change happens, which sounds silly when you consider that's literally the colonial times until the post-war era. But for the Kithane, I don't think a whole heck of a lot changes. And so I wanted a little snippets throughout just to kind of give them a voice. And then in the actual historical narrative, I wanted there to be kind of a through line. And I think that just stopping at certain points to say this is what's happening now, and this is a representation of this broad time frame is really what I was going for.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I mean, regardless of which events you kind of call out, I did get this sense going through that the history of the town has been defined. Like there's this, as you're saying, this sort of changeless quality to it, but the actual sort of stopping points along the way, it feels like this cycle almost of kind of tragedy or grief or conflict, compromise, and then becoming older and wiser and getting a little more understanding as a community out of that. That's kind of the recurrent cycle that seems to be underlying what's going on here.
No, completely. So one of the first things I had talked a lot with Charlie Cantrell about this book over the course of time, and he's got a lot of experience in certainly in editing things down. And my biggest question to him was, how do you know what to keep and what to lose? And he said to me, this is, and it's what I've tried to hold on to the entire time I've been going through this. He tries, if it's something that's interesting for the players, if you think it's something someone's going to go, hey, wow, at, then keep it. If not, then it probably doesn't need to be there. And I wrote this book, I think it settles around 60,000 words. I wrote more than double that initially.
Wow.
And a lot of it was in the history, and a lot of it was in the characters themselves. We'll talk about it when we get to the characters. They're much smaller blurbs. They're literally like a short paragraph now, but some of them were pages, and of course you can't keep that. A lot of the things that I took out were things that in the history section, for instance, there was a chimera that was a recurrent threat that kept coming back at these moments of grief or these moments of hardship, and that was going to be kind of this the string that kind of held it all together. But at the end of the day, I didn't think it was really particularly necessary because I couldn't find a way to keep it. It didn't gel with the rest of the modern era story, so it was just going to be this thing that got talked about in the past and never got brought up again. No, thank you.
That's
I
fair.
mean, you could always do a second book that's historical from the one period in Derry. If you
It's
wanted.
so funny.
Yeah.
I have a list of other books I'm going to be doing with this setting.
I have that as a question at the end of this, so we'll get there.
We'll definitely get there then.
So for the next 3 chapters, I don't know if we want to really do like an exhaustive accounting of everything in here, but if there's some favorites, I have a few favorites from the geography, the characters, and the motleys that I'm happy to call out. Josh, I don't know how you want to approach things.
Yeah, I don't know. I like it so much, but I don't know if anything super stuck out more to me than something else. But yeah, I do like just how you do the places, and like it's just highlighting like stuff that I could points of interest, and just the way you write it and stuff was really good. But I don't really have anything like that. I'm sorry, I tried.
All right. No, that's
Yeah.
For me, I think it was the Poet's Grove was my favorite because been steeped in poetry for many years.
Mm-hmm.
The Wayfinder's Tavern, because I'm always in favor of tavern life and role-playing games, especially because you had like these chimerical patrons who just sounded really fun to like deal with. The Silent Drinker. Daisy's Bakery, because I am pro baked good in every sense. The Robert Frost site, which you mentioned, I would love to see that because I enjoy Robert Frost.
Take a look at my Instagram. I'm pretty sure I have those pictures up there, actually.
Nice. And the Pinkerton Academy, too. I mean, that's like a whole subsetting to explore because you can do these whole like high school social dynamic changelings story. But yeah,
that is a big one for me because, again, like I said, I went to school there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my friends did. Again, my first view reader is my wife's best friend. In her last set of notes that she just sent me, she's like, I love the Ink and Ember Society. I love the Pinkerton stuff because it reminds me of school. It made me nostalgic for high school, and I didn't even like high school.
I mean, it's a nice, diverse assortment of places pointed towards different purposes, but all of them still convey that, I won't say little town, but tight-knit town feel.
And I do like the moral perspective, enchanted perspective on everything. Like that's really helpful, I think.
It reminded me of the toy box in that regard a little bit.
Well, again, that I think if there was any book that I tried to not emulate, but I borrowed like a format from, especially for this section here, I think the toy box is one of the ones I referenced the most.
That might explain the 1E feeling then.
Yeah. And then there are 7 freeholds / glades, which is a lot for a small town.
Yep.
But it fits. I like how pre-Resurgence, the center of Fey life was a large barn, and now it's like a fancy carriage house converted into a secret manor.
Well, we did. I know we did that changeling demographics episode, and I went through like what is normal or whatever for. But I do think the important question for if you're going to have it centered in a place is how many freeholds and how many changelings do you want in this place?
Many.
Because you can justify in any direction, right? So this makes sense here.
Exactly. I asked this question a long time ago on the Changing the Law, Changing the Dreaming Facebook group. I asked specifically about demographics and what people thought, were appropriate. Because for me, at first I just wanted a diverse cast. And then as that particular cast grew, I was trying to figure out a way to justify it. And I think narratively, again, as we get to the appendices, I explain why there are so many.
Yep.
And hopefully I think that lands with at least some people.
It makes sense to be clumpy, I think. Like you wouldn't want every single town the size of Derry to have this many Fae if you're like a traveling chronicle where you're going from place to place. Like don't make it all like that, but having a place like that makes total sense to me. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of all of those changelings, chapter 4 is where we get descriptions of many of them. And I'm guessing that at least some of these, because you did have playtesters for this, right? For the setting / the adventure. So if that's the case, were any of these PCs or NPCs kind of in the mix who then became part of the book?
No. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a thread of some of them. So we are currently playing through this story right now. So
Okay.
this story is, because I only just finished this story a week before I put this up on Storyteller's Vault.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no doubt. But my players, there are threads of some of them of previous characters that have come through, like in a previous story set in this setting. My wife played a sheriff, like a sheriff's deputy kind of character that was a police officer that kind of worked with the local noble court to keep order. And that character doesn't exist in the story as written, but I have notes of that are going to go into a future story. I have the first pass reader. She played this Slua, who was kind of they worked in an antique shop. They used soothsay and naming and things like that. There's a character that has a lot of that similar motif that showed up in the stuff now, and things like that. All of the characters that I have here are characters that kind of came out of the stories that were bubbling around in my head. My big problem when it comes to role playing games is sometimes I think I should just write a novel.
Well, yeah.
Because I don't know if it's just me, but I oftentimes have run the risk of creating a story that I want to see played out, how I want to see it played out.
It's not just you.
Okay, good. And I'd like to think that I do a decent enough balance. Most of the time, I'm the storyteller of my group, and they haven't kicked me out yet, and it's been 20 odd years. So
if you want to go in that other direction, there are people in the Storyteller Vault doing like flat out fiction too. If you ever get you get a story and you're like, maybe this isn't so much a chronicle as a story. Maybe I should just write that.
Yeah.
So
tie a novel to the Nutfield setting.
Interesting you just say that, and we'll talk about that at the end.
Okay.
Well, so briefly, I wanted to call out my favorite characters because I had favorites. I really enjoyed Amara Moss, the groundskeeper, because she ties into some nice mythemes about the she and the land. Indigo Marrow, who I wish every art teacher ever were like them. Jonathan Lee, because more Ledoux representation is always good. And the Old Oak King, because having this kind of ancient Kubera in the mix, it opens up a new angle of stories that you could tell in the setting, which can stand alone, but then also intersect well with the vibe of like quiet and or hidden magic that you have under the surface. So I think those were all good. Lots of she and boggins and trolls, all of whom I would say fit well into the tropes of like homespun magic and hearthside politics, if I can call it that.
I'll say the knockers are well done too for that. Just they fit well.
The knockers were a late addition. I originally only had one knocker in the setting, and then I drove up to I had a thing to get rid of, an old TV, and I drove up to it's called the Derry transfer station. It's the dump. I drove to the dump to get rid of the television, and I stood there looking around for a moment, and I was like, this is not a bad idea. Look at that. Okay, and that shed over there?
I love doing that.
You find inspiration in the weirdest places.
Yeah, I call it spot the freehold. I mean, it's not always freehold
like
stuff,
that.
but like, it's go around.
If you want to see a picture of the Old Oak King, there is a picture of that exact tree on the Nutfield Instagram at the Broadview Farm Conservation Area. My wife and I had on our wedding day 2 ceremonies. We had a ceremony at the church, in the afternoon, and in the morning we had a nice little hand fasting, and it was at that tree. So I highly recommend taking a look at him. He is important to me at the very least, and my wife. So,
and this is also an opportunity to shout out the lovely art that we get in the book.
My wife is the illustrator for all of the original art in this book. She is a fantastic artist. I don't know what I would do. This book would not exist, actually. I'm confidently would say this book would not exist without her, because without the pictures of the characters in this book, without the beautiful cover picture without some of the other original interior art that she did, I don't think I would want to display it to other people, because otherwise it's just words, and words are fine. I mean, we all read novels, but the pictures that she did brought all of these places and these people to life for me. Like, I'm looking at the Boggins right now, and Will Foster is my stand-in character, my viewpoint character. That's a better way of putting it. And I look at him, and he is exactly what I see when I think of that character. And I don't, in my brain, when I first create a character, I don't have a visual very well. I don't know, maybe it's just not how I think, but I work on a little bit of a description, and then she takes it and she creates this majestic thing. I said very plainly I wanted these pictures to be like sketches in someone's journal somewhere. They're not full on amazing portraits. They're sketches, and she doesn't have the capability of doing anything half-assed. So these characters came out better than I could ever imagine. I could gush about her art, for hours.
But again, though, it has that first edition quality of like the little character portraits. So, yeah. So with chapter 5, I would like to just quote you from this opening letter, because I really enjoyed the one comment here where it says, "Glamour doesn't just pool in sacred places, it gathers in shared stories, around kitchen tables, in broken down cars, at the edges of campfires and coat closets, where laughter lingers and secrets are kept. These are the true strongholds of Fae society." Which I thought was just a very elegant way to encapsulate a lot of the mood the book is trying to build. So, right on.
Thank you. It makes the most sense to me, when you're talking about a creature that subsides on imagination, that lingers in our dreams, that those stories are the most important things that we create.
Indeed.
And it has to be talked about here.
So we get a handful of groups in this chapter, from the baronial household to the Morrow farm. Wayfinder's Tavern again is one of my favorites, but the Ink and Ember Society, just beautiful.
Yeah, the 2 high school cliques came first. And then I was like, do they gather anywhere? Do they do anything? Are they just fighting each other? And then the thought was, I also had the high school teacher, the Hawk, Sir Daniel. And I don't know why I struggled so long, because I didn't want to create another freehold, because I felt like they were getting kind of excessive. I feel already they were a little excessive. But then I thought to myself, well, wait, that battery idea, that's not a bad thought. They can bring it with them wherever they go. And I remember having a class it's called the Pinkerton Building. It's this big red stone, red brick building that's like the most predominantly displayed structure when people show pictures of Pinkerton. And inside are these really old rooms. And I remember having a class there. I can't remember for the life of me what the actual class was, but it was a very intimate setting, and all of us were kind of sitting around in a circle, and the teacher was in the middle talking about whatever they were talking about. And that memory kind of overtook me, and I wanted to translate it into this. I don't know how well that worked out, but obviously something spoke to at least a couple of people, because people have responded well to that one so far.
Nice. So is the intention that all of the characters, with the exception of like the Dantean, obviously, are all of them intended to be involved in one or maybe more than one of these groups? I didn't actually count up and see if all of them were accounted for in the notable members, but was curious whether that was the case.
No. So I also have in chapter 5, there's a section called the Gentle Fae of Nutfield, and it's basically a catch-all. Anybody who's not in one of those groups, or not, or perhaps they're maybe transient between a couple of the different groups, they're kind of a catch-all in that one group. They're kind of a neutral party. They're unaligned, I think is a better way of saying it. They don't belong to any major faction. And when you think about a motley, it's a group of Fae who work together towards a common goal, and it has that found family quality to it. And I would love to say that the entire town is effectively one giant motley, and maybe they have these little divisions in amongst themselves. And so the Gentle Fae themselves, they can kind of work together or apart or between these different groups as needed.
What kinds of conflicts between the groups, do you envision like a table building a game around? If someone were to actually take this and run, if not the introductory story at the end, but their own, like there's a lot of characters and a lot of potential alliances and rivalries and whatever. So
Right.
are there specific kinds of stories that you would suggest people try to tell with them?
So right off the bat, I can tell you, for instance, the two high school cliques are opposed to one another, and I think their little drama plays out in a microcosm of the battle between the Seelie and the Unseelie. One group is for fostering and harboring glamour for everybody and trying to make it more. I don't want to say equitable, but make it so it's there for everybody. And the other group is, they're very selfish, but they're teenagers, and so it plays off of the idea that maybe it's the way that these kids are seeing that. But at the same time, that's kind of a traditional way of looking at the conflict between the two courts, right? But inside the town, there are little rivalries between, even in the individual groups. The Morrow farm, it was initially two different farms here in town that I based them off of, and they were like a Hatfields and McCoy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided to merge them, and so it's kind of almost like a civil conflict between two factions of this family. And so you could be siding with one side or the other, and as we get a little further on into the appendix, we see that one side certainly is not as good as the other.
Hmm.
The Lost Boys are particularly mischievous, and they like to have a lot of fun doing whatever it is that they want to do at any given time, and so they could kind of poke fun at any spot in town. So if I was to try to tell somebody what kind of story they might want to run, I think find the group that resonates the most with you and imagine where they can go next, because I think that hopefully I've laid out the groundwork for who goes to the Wayfinders, or who the Morrow family are, or the Ink and Ember Society, what they're all about. I think if I'm thinking about it, I think the Ink and Ember Society probably has the most meat behind them.
Hmm.
Like, for someone to come in and input their own thing to it beyond the stories that I'm fixing to tell.
All right. Makes sense. So, on the subject of stories, we don't want to spoil this, I think. I try to keep things spoiler free, but
Okay.
I dare say there are several features that I wanted to highlight because I liked the way you did them. The story is also, is it The Weight of Small Things is kind of like your title for the chronicle one might run?
Correct. So like this story is called The Weight of Small Things. I think the chronicle itself is it's changeable. I think that I've gone through a lot of different title changes throughout, but I think that if you were just take this one story, this one little story is called The Weight of Small Things, and it's intended to be run in a relatively short amount of time.
And it does seem very geared towards people who are new to playing Changeling, because you give some advice at the start with these basic character archetypes kind of built around a Kith, a Seeming, and a Court. They have an occupation. There are suggested trait assignments, strengths and weaknesses, some backstory seeds, and motivations, arts, and realms. So like all of these little tools, which if you're then confronted with the dots on the sheet as a new player, this really kind of helps you get into that. At least that was my sense of what the intention was.
You're spot on.
Huzzah! I particularly liked the Redcap spoken word poet and the Slua ASMR performer.
So I took this to my players, and I said, I want to playtest this story. I want to playtest it as though it was somebody who was downloading the book tomorrow. So if you could please, you're not bound by these characters, but try, if you could please, to make one of these for me. My wife picked the Redcap poet. And the Redcap specifically is one of my favorites, because I like the idea of bending the expectations with the Redcap.
Yeah.
The Redcap baker, Daisy, is one of my favorite characters that is not aligned with any of the major groups in the entire book, because she's this darling for the town. Everybody loves her, in spite of the fact that she's a Redcap. Or in the Redcap Kith book, the Redcap knight or squire or whatever it was. I love those. I love that idea, basically.
I often have the same thing with Boggins, but that's twisting them.
Yeah. There's also this page with some helpful notes about running the story with little sort of, I don't know, aphorisms like the tone should shift like a storybook and every small thing has weight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice way to extend beyond just saying what the genre of a story is or the specific expression of the setting's theme and mood, things like that. So it's actual guidance for storytellers to keep them on track. And I think like with that and with the pre-packaged templates, like there are certainly players and storytellers who will chafe at that, and then there are ones who will cry with relief at that. So I don't want to say your mileage may vary because I do think this is a solid approach, but it does kind of live in between giving not enough and giving more than you need.
Yeah, it's not a full character sheet or anything you're giving.
No.
I almost did that too, and I thought to myself, that's just, I wouldn't use the full character sheet, so why would I put it up there? And so I did it mostly to save page space, but at the same time, I don't know how many people are going to pick this book up and have never run a Changeling game before. Maybe some people, maybe none. If it's none, that's what I like the idea. Maybe somebody's bored of their standard issue characters, and these are standard issue characters for the most part, but I put in there, if mix and match, use them as is, create your own. Doesn't matter to me what story, how you use these characters in the story. The idea is that they're there if you need them.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about this without spoilers, so, but I like it. I say I don't normally get adventures, but you keep coming across adventures that I like, so
I mean, I think we can at least say that there is a collection quest as the centerpiece. Like that's pretty evident from the start.
Yeah.
But there's lots of little offshoot paths. Like there's little side challenges with their own bespoke mechanics and
it becomes it's also a setting chapter. Like you could go, I'm not running this as a story, but all the places and the people and the things here you could still use totally.
It showcases a lot of different ways that conflict and challenge can be created in Changeling as a game, but then also the way in which it's presented. I really appreciated how the characters and the motleys and the spaces that we've already seen in the book, how they are really brought to life through the actions and the dialogue and the descriptions that we get in these scenes. So, yeah.
I originally had a completely different story in place here. But the story that I had in place did not showcase the town as much as I'd like it to. It showcased one small group, or two small groups, I guess, and a couple of places. And I thought to myself, the point of this is to introduce the town. This is your start point of a chronicle set here that nobody maybe would know anything about. So is this really the best introduction to this place? And at the end of the day, I did not think so. And so I was like, well, guess what? Starting at square one. And I had locked everything else. Like that other story, 95% done. So
future supplements for it's the storyteller's fault.
Yeah. So then that sort of completes the what's the word for not appendix? But
the intestines.
The rest of the intestines. Yeah. The main.
Ooh, there you go.
And there's some final thoughts about how to extend the story into loose ends and pointing back to the theme of memory and stuff. But in terms of expanding on the setting, so we really have to be spoiler careful with Appendix 1 because it is very front and center. This is for storytellers only.
Correct.
So yeah, lots of other stories and legends under the surface of Nutfield, including potentially an answer to the question of why are there so many Fae in this town?
Exactly. I needed a reason after careful consideration. And I was like, well, I can't not explain why. And so, again, hopefully that answer, it works for some people.
Yeah. And it's good because I think that the book as a whole and the introductory story are very good for everyday magic and dealings, but there are tables that are going to want big deal quests and portentous happenings and big complicated drama. So the story seeds that we get in the appendix here that point to these like deep legendary things under the surface, that's good for those players.
I mean, okay, I'll be completely honest. If you wanted to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it. To those people listening, I don't think you're going to spoil your appetite if you know more.
Well, I did make a list of like what can we say without giving things away that hint at some of the deeper issues. I think we can say that Thalane are involved. I think we can say
Definitely.
there's a Fomorian connection that is interesting and surprising. Maybe Harbingers of Winter would be a good companion volume for this book.
And I will say that as I was going through this as well, I referenced that book quite a bit.
Mhm.
Not in terms
Yeah.
of, I mean, obviously there are very clear connections, I think, in a couple of spots, but even in terms of like what font size to use.
Oh, wow. I do think also the early, more player-facing part of the book, you would go, oh, this feels maybe a little bit too idyllic and seely,
Right.
Mhm.
and I think this helps with that. It makes sense. It's not just helps. There's a reason for that, and this makes it
Yeah.
good. I think it fits all that.
That's where that Twin Peaks idea was coming from for me, because
Yeah.
it has that tension between something sublime under the surface and then something very unremarkable. Like, it's very homespun and apple pie and everything, but then you get the deeper you dig into these stories and the connections between them, the more potential you find for like the horror that Changeling does, or the grand high weirdness that Changeling does.
Definitely. My first pass reader, she did not have the appendices when she read through it at the first part, at the beginning, rather. Like, I gave it to her in chunks. And she's like, it just seems like everything is too happy, too nice. I mean,
Yep.
there's unseelie, but where's the conflict? What's going on here? And I'm like, Alice, it's okay. Here.
Oh.
Yeah.
By contrast, Appendix 2 is for everybody and has lots of fun, crunchy tidbits, which also enrich the setting, but just kind of in little incidental ways that I like.
I know it's not done yet, so I want to maybe give a little bit of feedback. I think a little bit more crunch might be nice in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's not enough mechanics, I think, for some of these.
Oh, I thought it
Chimera
was.
and things
I
like
thought it
that.
was great.
Maybe I'm reading the wrong version.
Oh, maybe.
No, I think you're both probably on the same one, because there are no stats for the Chimera. I had intended initially, and then like, all right, so I'm gonna jump a little bit. There is a second volume of this specifically that I am working on presently,
Okay.
that goes into details about the freeholds. It gives every single NPC a full character sheet, and the Chimera that we talk about here are specifically going to be given their own section.
It just sort of stood out to me because the story part, like the previous chapter with the adventure, actually did have chimerical stats, and then this one doesn't. And I'm like, yeah.
But they're fun. I mean, the Chimera, they kind of range from the typical little animations of natural phenomena or ideas all the way up to these like legendary creatures of great import. So it's a nice span. And I loved the charred bookmarks, chimerical object. It's like, yes, I need those. There's some notes on the prodigals who might be looking around. There are some autumn people. Honestly, with the autumn people, I confess that when I think of New England towns, the banality of sameness and stillness is kind of part of the equation, cast against the sweeping beauty and the homey charm, of course. But
this is actually I like how much detail you did on autumn people. You don't see that so much, and they're really good antagonists. So,
well, I thought about this goes back to my recent rewatch of Gilmore Girls, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think if any show in modern television history is going to showcase New England, even though it was filmed entirely in Southern California.
What?
I know, right? Because the mountains of Connecticut, you know those ones. But that show, it does it so well, and I think in such a way that the characters, obviously, in the town itself, are a big part of that show, and the weirdness of those characters. I think it's easy to see how they could easily be, if not full blown Kithane themselves, at least have some sort of touch of the dreaming. But like, I remember as I watch it, the town selectman in Stars Hollow, Taylor Dosey. I'm not saying he's necessarily an autumn person, but he's definitely got this antagonistic quality against anything different. And I wanted something kind of like that. These people that push you back against anything new or different or fun.
Well, they're very well crafted.
I also like that whispers from periphery bit. The rumors of prodigals and stuff.
Prodigals are a hard one, especially in a small town like that. I don't want, like, you'll note I didn't do vampires at all.
Yeah.
There are zero vampires that make their way here. So,
Yeah, they'd be like, here's the vampire that
Right.
lives here. Yeah.
I
Come
think
up
if you
from
go by,
Nashua.
Yeah.
if you go by vampire like Camarilla
Demographics.
demographics, like Manchester, the largest city in the state, has one vampire.
Yep.
Maybe it's a situation where it's like the Manchester and Nashua have a dueling kindred or whatever.
We close out with a couple mysterious final journal pages and a lovely map at the end.
Once again, kudos to my wife.
Yeah.
I took a snip from Google Earth. She kind of jotted down the roads as best she could. She kind of made them a little bit more windy, a little bit more waggly than they are in real life. And we plotted out where some of the big things would be, and fudged a couple of things as well. And there you go.
Nice.
I love this map. It's not my favorite piece from the thing, but it is up there. It is one of my favorite parts that we've done for this, because I like a good map.
Same.
I think anybody who's got that Boggins heart, that carries a little bit of Professor Tolkien with them wherever they go, they're going to love a good map.
I think there can be some Pisky appreciation as well. But
all right, I'll give you that.
Ishu, though, they just crumple it up and throw it away.
Oh no, yeah, they just go the road at their feet. That's all
where we're going, we don't need maps.
Love it.
So overall, I would say this book is a great example of how even a small, unassuming location can have these vast hidden depths and many stories and meaningful themes to explore. And it's okay to start small and work up to something large. I mean, that's what PCs do with their individual arcs. So applying that to a setting makes sense. And clearly it was made with love, which is always nice.
And there's so many things in here too, even if you're not going to set it there. Like, there's so much stuff in here that you could still use.
Yeah.
In all sorts of other small towns, or even not small towns. But
so you've hinted at the next installment. I noted that the Beast of Derry Village was teased at one point, I think in Appendix 1. But what's next?
So the Beast of Derry Village is the very next story. So I've got 2 storybooks in mind for the next 2 releases. The Beast of Derry Village, which should be probably, I want to say August or September. It's the story of one of our NPCs and how his arrival in this town is going to cause a little bit of upheaval, and how hopefully the player characters can fix things, either with a tragic end or hopefully with something a bit more positive. But I leave that in the player's hands. I'm not going to tell you how to fix it.
And you've referred to this as the Nutfield Codex. So is there some kind of framing story or other matter that's going to link everything together, or should each of these be treated as almost a standalone?
So you referenced throughout, you noticed the mysterious journal entries throughout. That is one of the town's inhabitants. He has a knack for remembering things and has been keeping these stories for, I was about to say everybody, but maybe not for everybody, for a very long time. He has his reasons for doing them, and how we came across these stories, I'm not sure, but I'm almost positive he's not going to like the fact that we're reading these.
I was very charmed when I figured out who it was. I was like, oh.
Yeah. And he will be narrating. These letters are going to be a through piece. They're the connective thread for every book that's going to come out with the Nutfield Codex. And so that individual will have something to say for everything. The 2 storybooks are tales that happened, that he's regaling you with. And then so the Beast of Derry Village, and then there's a Christmas story that I want to do. Santa Claus comes to Nutfield Town, and it deals with the idea of, from the player's guide, we talk about the immortals, and I asked for the pronunciation. I can't say it. I tried. My mouth just won't make the words, but the immortal fae who have found that balance. And you know what I'm thinking of, and I would love it if one of you would try to say the word.
Kuka, can you say it? Because that's
I feel like I should refuse to say it, but for the...
Was it Sioshan?
Shirhain.
Shirhain.
Yeah. It's like 2.5 syllables.
Shirhain. I'm doing too many syllables. Okay. Shirhain.
2.5 syllables, 4.5 vowels.
Jesus.
Mhm.
But the idea is from the player's guide, where there are these embodiments of story and these mantles of greater ideas. And I don't know if I'm the first person who thought of it. I don't have an ego to say that, but it seems obvious to me that Santa Claus would be one of them. And what happens? What
Mm.
happens when he comes around?
Well, we will keep an eye out for these.
Definitely. Like I said, I have a lot of ideas. I have, and then I mentioned earlier about the. It started out as an errata, and then obviously, I think the next full volume will have more page count than this one, because of how
Wow.
much ground it has to cover. It's every freehold, every character, a smattering of mortals, and the chimera.
So it's already probably the most detailed area in Changeling the Dreaming, and I think you're going to push it past most detailed in World of Darkness. I
Well, I'm
love
fine
that.
with that. I'm fine with that. My pipe dreams are. I have a story about the Lost Queen. Almost like, do you recall the werewolf supplement? Song is it Song of Ages? I think.
Mm,
No,
Yeah, it's one of those.
you're asking the
I'm
wrong
not that big in
podcast.
werewolf.
There you go. Sorry.
Yeah.
The idea is okay. Well, how about this? Take all three immortalized books and cram them into one story.
All right, there you go.
It's an
Yeah.
epic story explaining who the Lost Queen is, what she wants, and basically what happens when she tries to enact whatever plan she's got going. And I got little things as well that I called in my head beyond the barony, which would be, there's an amusement park a couple towns over. What's going on there? Beach town, about 45 minutes away. What's going on there? Little things like that.
Mm.
New Hampshire's one beach.
You'd think, though. I mean, yeah, okay, it is our one beach. We have the Isle of Shoals too, so at least some of them. So there you go.
Hey. So any final words of advice or wisdom for readers who plan to pick this up and get into it?
Enjoy it. Enjoy yourselves. Don't let the fact that it's not quote unquote finished discourage you. And I made the joke yesterday that you'll be able to collect all the different versions as I upload them. So
Yeah.
you never know when one of them's gonna be a shiny version. So
And it might be quote unquote finished by the time this episode is released, because we're not quite sure yet when this will be released. So
that's fine too.
yeah.
But enjoy it. Enjoy taking a stroll in a quaint New England town, and hopefully you take something from it.
Yeah. Is there, if people wanted to reach out to you, is there somewhere online they could do that?
So I have that Instagram that's in the book. I'm also
Mhm.
I'm on the Changeling the Dreaming, Changing the Lost group on Facebook frequently. I don't tend to talk to a lot of people. Like I don't get accept friend requests for people I don't know. But I mean, if you're in that group, I'll happily talk to you. And I just started. I got on your guys' Discord just the other day after your invite,
Mhm.
and it's a
Huzzah.
nice community you have there. So it's a nice community of people who were once on Shadow Nesence, which is nice to see.
Yeah, because I don't remember when we became Facebook friends. This is how I found out about it,
Exactly.
though.
Yeah.
But
It's a long time ago.
yeah.
It's nice to see that still pieces of that community are kind of still alive in little corners of the internet.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a good segue for me to say that if other people want to find out how approachable we are, Josh, what are their options?
Well, they can join that Discord too at discord.me/CTP. You can send us a toot on Mastodon, changelingpod@dice.camp. You can email us, podcast@changelingthepodcast.com. There's our website for changelingthepodcast.com. We have a YouTube channel where all episodes go up as well after for Changeling the Podcast. And we have a Patreon if you want to support us, keep the lights going, balefires burning, Changeling the Pod for Changeling the Podcast there.
Links to all of which will be in the show notes to this episode.
And once again, I'm Josh.
I remain Puka, and also say thanks again, Tom.
Thanks again, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Down, down, down the road, down the Umber Road. It's been going through my head the whole episode.
Okay, that I didn't even occur to me after in the first however long because the title was originally A Dream of Umber Leaves or something like that, and then I kind of had the thought, oh well, this pathway is the connecting bit between all of them, and of course, I didn't realize, I had just recently watched Agatha. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, two trouts diverged in a wood, and I took the one less wayfared by.
Ooh. We're going to go with that one. I like that one.
Nay.
Some listeners may be unfamiliar with this book's namesake pigment umber, a mashup of iron oxide and manganese oxide that yields a brownish hue with shades of red, yellow, or green. It was briefly popular in Renaissance and Baroque painting for representing shadows. But for many, knowledge of the color and its name stem from the Crayola Big Box, where raw umber has made occasional reappearances since being discontinued in 1990. With that in mind, we heartily recommend other magical roads whose names recall some fanciful colors. A stroll down Goldenrod Lane is always accompanied by Chimera playing off-key smooth jazz in the hedgerows, whereas the Sepia Parkway is strewn with the remains of enchanted mortals, who wandered in and couldn't find their way out before they were devoured by dream panthers. And tales abound of the Razzmatazz Boulevard, a paradise of delights where ambrosia grows on trees and nectar flows in the drainage ditches for those willing to drink from them. We here at Changeling the Podcast are in the process of exploring and mapping these byways, in which we are supported by our esteemed patrons. These include Bad Company, Derek, Dorcadus, Elris, Hugo the Bogperson, Ia Bull, Jason Vines, Oreo, Raz Caboose, Sandchigger, Sija, Simon Strand, and Ware Buffalo. Many thanks for their support. If you too would like to be on the planning board for these and other expeditions, consider signing up at www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast. We also appreciate reviews on the podcast listening platform of your greatest convenience, or just tell a friend about our show to get the word out. In the meantime, stay safe on whichever roads you travel, remember the simple glamour of a fresh slice of apple pie, and as the sunset turns everything gold, just keep on dreaming.